Hi everyone, my name is Matthew Loughnane. I'm lead developer for the Level Up to VET game from Cape Koala Studios, and on behalf of our partner teams, I've been asked to run you through the development journey of the game. So from the initial prototyping stages to where we are now, which is a completely finished project and mobile apps available on iOS App Store and Google Play. So I've pulled together a quick timeline. I'm not going to bore you with all the minute details, but I want to take you through the whole process and highlight some of the big takeaways, especially from a developer point of view, in case anyone wants to tackle a similar project in the future. So starting off, this was even before I had joined the team. The partners met in Pori, Finland to kick off the project and lay down the groundwork for the next couple of years. I joined the project shortly after this meeting, and the team had a very strong initial concept, and they'd created this short video demonstrating the possibilities. You can see a lot of the elements of the 3D board game were kept through from this version right the way to the finished product. The 3D city, obviously, the avatar moving, the resources, although now they are in a slightly different format, and you can see the directional elements in this prototype and the cards appearing on screen too. So it was a very solid starting point from a dev point of view, even if it was a little daunting, where the sheer scale of it was huge. So in terms of the mechanics of the game, with the concept defined, as you saw in the prototype, I went about creating these different mechanics. So with any game, it's important to know the rules, and I kind of had to work back from this prototype that we had to build out what these different cards would be and how you would earn the resources, and obviously all the underlying code to pull all these pieces together. After a lot of discussion with the partners, we managed to distill these real world concepts that we wanted to teach into 3 different topics, which were learning about a career, learning about VET, and self-reflection and assessment. And so to kind of bring more gaming elements to the table, we introduced chances, which are pretty self-explanatory, jumps, so you could jump about to different parts of the game or of the city, and making a career decision, which would eventually become the points in the map where a player would level up. So I defined the structure of these cards, and our partner team in Cork IT or CIT were responsible for creating the game content. And given that we needed to make the content available in 5 different languages, we devised between us a way of collecting all the translations into Google Sheets, and then we scripted a way of collecting this information from the published Google Sheet into a JSON format using a bash library called JQ. We use the same technique for localizing for all the parts of the game, so every button, every piece of UI element, you can see it's listed here in the Google Sheet and then translated into this JSON format which the game code reads. So with the mechanics, putting the mechanics aside for a second, we went about looking at the cityscape. So to create a virtual city, we used a couple of Unity Store assets and combined those with the avatars from Cinti Studios. These were high quality but low poly assets, allowing us to focus on the quality of the game mechanics while maintaining the requirement that this game be playable on all mobile devices. Initially, we only created 1 block of the city to let our character run around in, and at this stage of the game, we weren't too worried about the look or the feel. We just wanted to nail what these mechanics and how the game worked. But I will point out that one important feature of this early version of the game was the disco board. This unfortunately didn't make it into the final version of the game, but it was great fun while we had it, so I still miss you, Disco City. Finally, we pulled together a very early design guide to help structure what the game UI would look like, and so that it was consistent from the very point that we started to develop it. Looking back, a lot of these themes are still relevant to the final game, The different gradients representing different cards, in particular, that still remains consistent, and other elements like the rounded UI and the buttons, those have completely changed. So moving on to the next step, with the initial game mechanics working correctly, we started to look at the structure of the game and how players would progress and eventually complete the game. So after our initial piloting round with only one level available, I should point out, we came up with a level design that combined exploring the cityscape with earning different rewards. Our players would start in a small part of the city and would have to get promoted and level up to their chosen career to access more of the city and learn about advanced aspects of those careers that they've picked. We're not sure who came up with the naming conventions for the levels at this point, but they remain in the final game, so kudos to one of our partners who did that. A big part of our first round of piloting focused on how we could make the game more appealing and playable too. We received lots of great feedback, and eventually we distilled it down to the following. People wanted to be able to explore the city, more movement and animations in the city. People didn't understand what the different resources were to be used for, and to be fair, at this point neither did we. And perhaps the most damning, how do I play this on my phone? People were still struggling. So we leapt into action and started addressing these issues right away. To allow for exploration, we created this system of pathways for the player to move around in, thereby exploring the city and giving control to the user, but still limiting how far or where the player could move. This sounded like a simple solution at the time, but it was not. Anyway, I'll come back to that in a moment. For more action and movement, we felt like we needed more than just avatars, so we added spinning portals to designate different types of categories. So we said goodbye to the disco board and added more dynamic pieces to the city. We added vents, shadows, and toyed with rain for a little while too. One problem we didn't address right away was the resources. We did want to add a way of making questions easier at the cost of resources, so players would have to give up some experience to remove answers from their question sheet. But this never came around, but it was a great idea, so we wanted to give credit to our Finnish partners for that one. For further testing of the game, we created a small website to deliver the different game files or APKs for Android and detailed the changes for each version of the game. Of course, these weren't the only ways in which we listened or implemented changes, but this was from the first round of testing, and these were the biggest and most direct changes. So with all the solutions in development, we just needed some extra help to test the subsequent releases of the game. Our partner team in Finland actually arranged a week-long testing sprint to get the city-wide pathway system tested. So I was fortunate enough to spend the week exploring Pori while the students explored our level up city, finding bugs, learning about Jira, and completing 2 full testing sprints within the 1 week. For our second round of piloting, we needed a much wider audience, and so we decided to deploy the game to the app stores and use the beta testing functionality. So for Apple and iOS, that meant using TestFlight, and for Google Play, that meant using an open beta testing channel. There were 2 separate links for users to use based on their phone's OS, so the process of installing the game was much simpler, and participants were asked to complete a questionnaire regarding the improvements and playability of the game directly from a button within the game. The biggest feedback we received was most damning for us at Cape Koala in this round of testing. The game was hitting all of its objectives well, but it wasn't optimized enough to play on the mobile devices at all. So we had to combat these issues in a lot of different ways. The layout and size of the city changed. It was dramatically scaled down. We started using a lot higher strength of occlusion techniques. So this meant only rendering only the necessary parts of the game. We changed shadows and light mapping, and we even started working on different level of detail models to ensure the game had less polygons, and so would therefore be faster loading the game. But as the end of the project loomed, we decided to throw out our entire city and rebuild a new one with a lower poly count with colorful visuals, but retain the same waypoint system and directions. The result was a familiar looking city with brighter colors, and it allowed for more processing power to add more special effects, like our newly designed portals. With the redesigned city, we also gave the UI a refresh too. Feedback had led us to make the following decisions. The left bar wasn't necessary, people wanted to see more of the city, and people wanted to see a map so they knew what and where they were exploring. The resources were also still too complicated, and we determined that the most important one was experience, and that became the new de facto set of points. Running around the city was far smoother with these changes, and the new UI gave the game a fresh look. While all this was happening, the content for the game had been continuously worked on, and we were using the JQ scripts to pull the content into the game regularly as partners translated it, and CIT provided their brilliant artwork. During the final stretch of development, we pulled together the loose ends of the code and built one cohesive mobile game. The gradient colors from the first round of piloting had made their way right the way through to the end. The spirit of the prototype and the pathways tested in Finland all combined into the game we're presenting now. Players roll a dice and navigate the city with arrows using 6 different avatars and collect experience points to level up their career choices. It offers the player the opportunity to explore different career pathways and informs them with general skills all along the way. And so that is the final product. The game is ready to download now, and we're still tweaking small parts of the game, but we're very pleased that we've hit all the objectives of the initial idea and built a game that explores these VET pathways in a fun and unique way. So with that, thank you very much to all our partners for their help and insight, and thank you very much for watching.